Hey, and we're live.
We're live.
Welcome. Hey, Levi.
Hi, Rob.
It's February. Happy Valentine's Day.
It has
Uh,
come again. Yes. Happy Valentine's Day. Happy President's Day in the
that's right,
United
President's Day.
States. Right.
Um, so here we are for our next Lightroom Hangout. Our topic this month was lies that cameras tell, and we have a special guest that isn't actually here yet, but we're hoping that he will show up.
That's right. That's right.
Perhaps he's really devoutly observing President's Day somewhere. So
I've got his number, so I'm gonna give him a call here.
keep
And,
trying. Keep trying to reach him.
yeah.
We've been trying to reach him for a while. So Jeff, maybe if you're watching, come on there. So hello to everyone else. While we try to get Jeff, we're going to just kind of keep on moving. So each month, Levi and I do a Lightroom-centric hangout for photofocus.com. And we've been really lucky to have sponsors like Perfectly Clear kind of helping us to be able to show up and give this to you. So they are sponsored this month, and they have been for a couple months now. And they're even giving us a copy of their Perfectly Clear software that plugs into Lightroom or Photoshop that we're going to give away at the end of this hangout. So you got to stay tuned at the end to do that. And the way that you get into the running for that giveaway is by sending us a question or a comment. All right, and so far we've got Alan found the Q&A pod, and Cheryl did. So I'm going to just share my screen and show you a screen capture so I can, if you've not done this before, because I realize sometimes it seems a little confusing. So if you go to the page on Google+, this is from a previous Hangout that we did. You'll see this little play button. Click that play button, and there's a little Q&A button up there. All right. When the Hangout's actually running, you'll see me or Levi. And then up in the top is this little icon, this little grid icon. Click on that, and there's a Q&A option. Click on that Q&A button, and that's going to open this little Q&A pod on the side. You can click Ask a New Question. You can type in a question, and we'll do our best to answer it during this live Hangout. Or you can leave a comment. But when you put your question or comment in there, then Levi gets your name, and then at the end of the Hangout, that's how he will select the winner. So we'll throw that up a little bit later too to help anyone who missed that when we just started. So yeah, we've got folks coming in all over the place. I'm up in the Northeast in New Hampshire. Levi, it looks like you're home. Is that right?
I'm home. I am home in the Northwest in Oregon, in Portland.
So we've got the two coasts of North America kind of covered, and we got folks from all over. And Jeff, if he makes it in, is down in Texas. So got a nice little triangle there. So Jeff has a really great presentation that he's going to share when and if he joins us. But while we're waiting for Jeff, we're going to talk about some of the things in Lightroom that you can do.
Yeah, because there's a lot of things we can do to correct the problems our cameras make for us. And
sorry, I get a little dry feed over here. Yeah, so from lens corrections, and there's a few different things that we can do to deal with kind of the inherent problems that each lens might present. Then there's issues related to maybe from chromatic aberration based on either the aperture you might be using might be more pronounced than at other aperture settings.
Right.
Then we have the camera profiles that a lot of new Lightroom users kind of struggle with at first. When you get your camera, no matter what brand it is, you might on the back of your camera dial in some settings that you like for contrast or saturation, sharpness, things like that. Maybe even kind of effects.
Yeah.
Black and white, or
ones, the built-in profiles that your camera has, like the standard and neutral and faithful and vivid and landscape, all those.
So, and then when you bring your photo into Lightroom, all of a sudden you see this photo that you thought looked great, maybe on the back of your camera, and it changes. It looks maybe flatter, gets a little duller. And what's happening there is Lightroom doesn't understand those style settings that your camera might have dialed in. And so it says, hey, I can't even see those. I can't render them. So here's my default option. And we'll talk about how you can use Lightroom. Hey, Jeff is here. All right. How you can use Lightroom to maybe move the defaults closer to what you see on your camera, and then we'll show you how to set that as your new default so that when your photos come in, when you're shooting RAW, that is. If you're shooting JPEG, well, then it all gets baked into that nice JPEG, and what you see on your camera should be what you see inside of Lightroom too. So we'll show you how to do that and some more things, and then we'll take your questions throughout all of this. So now that Jeff's here, maybe Levi, we do a little introduction, and we
yes,
can
let me
bring him
introduce
into
Jeff to you a little bit. So I've known Jeff for several months. I met him at ProPhoto Plus Expo or ProPhoto Expo in New York, where he and I were both presenting about Perfectly Clear. And Jeff is one of the design engineers behind Perfectly Clear, and the most powerful thing I've seen Perfectly Clear do is correct for some of the problems that our sensors and cameras create. And I didn't even realize it was the camera creating the problem, but Jeff is a whiz about this stuff. So, Jeff, we're glad you're here.
Hey, Jeff.
Oops, I've got you muted. Hang on. Let's see. We can't hear you, Jeff. I don't have you muted. Let's see if do you have headphones plugged in?
Got a visual?
Or you look great.
All right. Can you do this all in sign language?
Let me alert Ramona that we've got Jeff on.
All right. Why don't you? Hey, how about this? While you work with Jeff to get his audio up, why don't I show a little bit what I was talking about with camera profiles?
Yeah, you're on.
All right. So I'm going to jump over to Lightroom, and all right, we'll take a raw photo here, and I'm going to press the D key to head over to Develop.
And let me just tell Jeff real quick. Jeff, try leaving and coming back. Sometimes it's as simple as that.
There's always some type of fun thing with these Hangouts. So down here in the camera calibration panel, there's this profile drop-down menu. Now I have a raw photo selected. It happens to be from a Nikon camera, but other cameras should see similar types of camera profiles. These are the default ones. They've since standardized these to kind of have these generic sounding names: camera landscape, camera neutral, camera portrait, so on, to try and mimic what profiles your camera might have. So if you look on your camera, you might have a setting for portrait, a setting for landscape. And each one of these camera profiles affects both the color rendering and kind of the contrast of the photo. So here we have the Adobe standard, which is by default the default one that Lightroom uses, and it's kind of the most neutral one. So if we switch this, if I switch this to camera landscape, the photo gets a little more contrastier. All right.
Excellent.
If I select a non-RAW photo, so here I have a TIFF photo. Okay. If this was a JPEG, a TIFF, a PSD file, you'll see embedded. So if you select a photo and you come in here thinking you're going to change it, and you see embedded, it means it's a non-RAW photo. So there's no other camera profile you can change to, because at some point in the production of this photo, a camera style or a profile was applied, whether it was in camera or in Lightroom or in Camera Raw. So that you'll only see these options for a RAW photo. And depending on the camera that it was taken with, let me see if I have a different set of choices here. Yeah, so here's one from a different camera and has a bunch of other options there too. So it doesn't matter what you see there. What you see is the right one for your camera.
You know what's a really fun one is if you have a Fuji camera, you click on that, and the list has like 40 options in there.
Oh, wow. All right. So
it's like crazy.
There's a lot of different choices
to make it work.
So what's cool about this is you could find a profile that maybe you like better than Adobe Standard as your starting point.
That wouldn't be hard.
And it wouldn't be hard. And you can make that your new default setting, which we'll go back to because there's a few other things I want to show you before we get to that. So how's Jeff doing?
Excellent. Jeff, have you muted yourself right now? Click on your icon at the bottom, the little profile picture of yourself. I think you'll see a red. There you go.
There we go.
Say something again.
Nope.
Nope, it didn't work. Oh, you know, right there's a settings wheel in the Hangout window. and see what your input is on there. And we'll try that one out. Sorry about this, guys. There's always something with, Hangouts are wonderful. We love them as a free service. But they are free, and so we pay the price. Still can't hear you, Jeff.
Yeah, we're not hearing it. So but sometimes what people have had to do is totally like close your browser completely, launch it again, maybe even hate to say it, but maybe even a reboot, because if some other application has a hold of your mic, maybe that's what the problem. I don't know. Wish I knew.
Well, and Rob has better success in Safari than he does in Chrome.
True. Yeah, I'm on Safari now.
Yeah.
Go figure. So we do have some questions and comments coming in. That's great. So if you want to be entered into the drawing, keep those questions and comments coming in the Q&A pod, and I'll try and answer a couple of questions. So Richard asks if I'm using the latest version of CC. Yes, I am. But all the things that we'll show should apply to even as far back as Lightroom 4, Lightroom 5. There's nothing,
or even 3 for the most part.
Yeah, that will show that is Lightroom CC specific. If we do, I'll try and make a note of that. But otherwise, you should be fine. Elena's asking, when you export, is it better to do with a JPEG or a TIFF? Well, that really depends on the job or the reason you're exporting. So if I was saving out a photo to put on Facebook, then I would choose a JPEG. If I was maybe exporting a photo to send to be printed by an online print service, maybe I would do TIFF. So it really is going to vary with your purpose for creating that copy via export. So no one right answer there. All right?
Right. I typically do a JPEG. If I'm going to Facebook or email it, for the most part, it's usually a JPEG for me.
Yeah, that's probably the most common choice that people make. But you might have other reasons to make other. I mean, I teach a class at a community college, and I'll export DNG so that I can give them a copy of a RAW file to play with. So it really just depends on why are you exporting, and then that might determine the file type. All right. And Mark's got a question about chromatic aberration. Difficulty seeing the difference in images when I click the reduce chromatic aberration. Well, yeah, why don't we take a look at that? I've got a good
great
chromatic aberration example.
And we usually see chromatic aberration when we're in a really high contrast situation, when you've got like something dark against a bright sky. You'll see this rim of a different color around the edge of your subject.
Yeah, so here's a photo just like that. So here's a saxophone player, backlit, the sun is right behind him, and also I'm wide open, so I'm f2.0. So that combination of really wide aperture and a high contrast scene is really prone to getting this type of chromatic aberration. If I go to the lens correction panel, we see on the basic tab there's a couple, actually 3 different checkboxes here, but the first 2 are the ones you'll probably use the most. And these checkboxes actually correspond to things that you'll see in other tabs here. So enable profile corrections, it's here, but it actually is the same one that you'll see here. All right. And under color tab, we have this remove chromatic aberration. It's the same one. Why are they here and there? Well, it's just here because on the basic panel, you can kind of save a step and just check these boxes. And just by my doing that, some things about this image changed. So let me go back out to fit screen here so we can see it all, and let me uncheck these, and let's talk about what they do. So the first one is enable profile corrections, all right? And that is designed to correct any inherent problems with the lens itself. And that might be vignetting, that kind of darkening around the edges, or it might be due to it being a wider angle lens, it might having distortion, either a pincushion or a barrel distortion caused by the lens itself. And so each one of the lenses has a profile created for it, and with each update of Lightroom, new lens profiles get added, just like new camera RAW files get supported. We also get new lens profiles. Now, these lens profiles are primarily targeting RAW files. So again, if I had a JPEG file or a TIFF, I may not see any difference by checking this box, and there may not be actually a profile associated with the JPEG version. All right, so it's mostly for RAW files, not exclusively, but you'll definitely see it you'll have more options. Excuse me.
Right.
With RAW. So if I go to the excuse me, profile panel, we see that same checkbox is now checked. In this case, it automatically determined that it was shot with a Nikon camera. It was a 50mm lens, and it chose the right profile. There's only one there. All right. And so the big difference there by turning this off is really the vignetting. All right. Not much distortion with this 50mm lens, but there's definitely a bit of vignetting around the edges there. What's cool about this panel, all right, is that you can use these sliders down below, this distortion and vignetting sliders. Those are the two things this profile is trying to correct. Right? When it's set in the center here, that means the correction's being applied based on the profile. Right? If I reduce, say, the vignetting slider down to 0, we see that it totally turns off that vignetting effect, or that vignetting correction, I should say. So you might have a lens where you actually wanted to correct the distortion, but maybe you like the vignetting. Maybe you know it was subtle enough, and you kind of just wanted that darkening of the edges. So you can actually apply the profile correction and then use this like a throttle to dial it back. All right, and so that's kind of a neat option. So it's not just a one. It can be a one-click fix, and that's great. But you can also then fine-tune that. I never really ever take them in the opposite direction, but I guess you could do that too. All right. So the next tab is our chromatic aberration tab. And there are two types of chromatic aberration trying to be fixed here. So this goes back to the question that was asked. There's this lateral chromatic aberration, and then the defringe settings down below are really going to target more of this type of chromatic aberration. So when you just check this box, you may not see much of a change. This really is a kind of chromatic aberration that tends to appear around the edges of the lens, and my understanding is kind of on wider angle lenses. So you may not actually see much depending on the lens that you're using. There may not be a change there. It may not, or maybe very subtle, and especially if it's not a wide angle lens. All right.
For me,
if you're going to use
that bit of purple or green that I get, but
and sometimes it takes care of it. So we'll see what it does. You definitely want to use the profile correction too. You'll tend to get a better result by having that enabled as well. So let's see if by checking this box, if it takes care of the more obvious issues here. And so in this case, it didn't make a dent in that particular issue that we have there. And there's even some green. So we have some green fringing along here and along the back of his shirt. Then we have some really kind of magenta, pinky red fringing along here, and there's some more green here. So if checking that box doesn't actually remove the problem that you were trying to solve, then you can come down to the sliders down here below. All right?
Or you can use the dropper.
You can use the dropper. I find that I never quite get it right with the dropper.
Oh yeah. Okay.
You can definitely give it a try. I like to just use the slider. So sometimes with chromatic aberration, you want to zoom in even further. Like I'm at 3:1 here. Most of the times I'm just at 100% or 1:1. But with this, you might want to zoom even deeper, especially if you're going to use the dropper. Right? Then you can try to sample, and it's kind of a one-click in the zone. And so in this example, it did fix this area, but it didn't quite solve the rest here. So, so what I kind of end up doing is just using the sliders. All right. If you this is a tip throughout all of Lightroom. There's a little header for each of these sections. If you double-click on that, it just reset all of these sliders for me, so I didn't have to do them one at a time. So what's cool about using the sliders, I think, is if you hold down your Alt or Option key and you click on this purple slider here first, you'll see exactly where the problem is. And then as you increase the amount, it starts to decrease the problem.
Awesome.
Right? And so I can see that's kind of going away, and there's still some kind of red pinkish there. So maybe what I can do is come down to my hue slider here and maybe move these adjustments to try and see if I can include that. And so again, I'm holding down the Alt or Option key, and that kind of black area that's appearing it's showing me now the range it's being included to correct that problem.
Oh, marvelous! Yeah, I haven't tried it with the Alt key. That's a
Yeah,
secret
and so
for Lightroom as well. If you press and hold the Alt key, you may see
it does a
something
lot of
magical
magic.
happen. Yeah.
That's right. And so for me, just using that key and those sliders, you can really just target in on the problem and remove it pretty quickly and target it. So, and now we have some green down here, so I can do the same thing here with the green. Hold down the Alt or Option key, and now I see that green appear, right? And I start to increase it until it's kind of starting to go away, and then maybe I'll come down to my hue sliders here and just open that up a little more, try and take care of the green. All right, and so now the green and the purple are done. Now here's a problem, all right? He happened to be wearing a tie that was like designed for chromatic aberration. It's like the same color, you know, purpley magenta red here. And if you see along the edges of the tie and the color here, it desaturated the tie. All right, and so that's bad. That's a problem. All right.
It's a global adjustment, so that's
it's a global adjustment. So if I hold down that Option or Alt key again and go back to my purple slider, you see the whole tie isn't, you know, it's part of this color spectrum. It's part of the problem here. So I made my adjustment. I solved my problem, but I made a new problem. So
fortunately, it happens to coordinate with his outfit. So you know.
It does. So if I come up to my my adjustment brush, down at the very bottom is the defringe option. Right? If I dial that all the way down to 0, and I'm going to paint in here, I can paint away that defringe adjustment. And because there's no actual fringe anywhere near here, I'm not really worried about undoing the problem I tried to fix. I'm just really trying to bring back the color in his tie.
Oh, great idea.
And so now I've just been painting just with a negative defringe. There's no other setting in my adjustment brush, right? And I've just brought that in, and I've just taken that out, right? Looks like I went a little bit over there and the green came back. So I'm going to just erase my painting off of the green. All right, and so now I've got this adjustment, and my chromatic aberration is now gone, and I'm a happy camper. So
that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, and so that's my best chromatic aberration example I have. This image just had both, and he had a tie that matches, so it really came together very well. So hopefully that helped to answer the question.
Yeah, I think so. And we've got a lot of questions coming in, and we're really glad that you guys are asking questions. We're probably going to focus. We'll check in with Jeff here.
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We're here.
Yeah.
I see green dots. I'm talking.
We've got a lot of questions coming in. We'll probably focus on the questions concerning these, the camera corrections that we're talking about today. But if you'll stick around with us, we'll spend some time on all your other questions towards the end. But we've got Jeff here for a few minutes, so let's introduce Jeff again. Hi, Jeff.
Yeah,
Jeff Stevens from Athentech. And Jeff, what do you do?
So I run the product development division at Athentech. I make the products. We've got a couple of scientists, a couple of PhDs that are inventing some really cool stuff.
Wow.
And I help take what they build and put it in products that can go out and be in people's hands. Our Photoshop and Lightroom plugins, our standalone apps, the mobile apps, and then our B2B business as well. We license a lot of our technology to some of the biggest names in the photo industry. So I manage that process as well.
Excellent. And Athentech is one of our sponsors for this Hangout, so we're really grateful that you guys help us make this possible. And we often talk about Perfectly Clear, and we often talk about how we use it in our workflow and things. So we will be talking a lot about Perfectly Clear today because it is one of the premier tools for fixing the problems our cameras make for us. And Jeff, you've got some slides to show us and kind of instruct us about how our cameras are fouling things up.
Exactly. What I'm going to do is share my screen here, and we'll get this little slideshow. It's short. I'll go through it pretty quickly. If folks have questions, just chime in. I'll either do them as they pop up, or we can cycle up at the end.
Yeah, Rob and I will try and keep an eye on the questions and watch for pertinent ones to what we're talking about right
jump
now.
in and interrupt me if there's something interesting that I need to address. But I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about how cameras see. Cameras see the world differently than the human eye does. Cameras aren't eyes; they're not just a digital eye. It's a totally different thing. So as part of the process of recording a digital image, it has some technological challenges that we have to overcome.
Excellent. And for everybody watching, this is recorded. About 3 minutes when we're done recording this whole Hangout, you can watch it from the beginning and zip forward and rewind and say, oh, now I get it. Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
Cool. Handy to remember. So I'm going to walk through very, very quickly how digital cameras work. I got this graphic from digitalcameraworld.com, and it's a really good high-level view of all of the steps that have to happen to get light onto a memory card and record it as a JPEG or a DNG or a CR2 or whatever kind of RAW or TIFF JPEG image file you're dealing with. And what you'll see, obviously, is that this thing on the right is very different than this thing on the left. They work in kind of the same way. They have some of the same components, lenses and light sensors, but there's obviously some key differences that I'll touch on. So the first thing is you've got your subject here, a bowl of apples. Light goes through a lens. It gets bent in lots of different ways. Rob, one of the things that causes that chromatic aberration that you were showing, particularly in zoom lenses, is that light of different wavelengths, different colors, bends at different amounts. And the more the light bends out towards the edges of the lens, the more that difference is going to be visible. So you don't usually see chromatic aberration in the middle of the lens because the light's pretty much passing straight through. As the light's going towards the edges of the lenses, that's when it gets bent more, and the blue gets bent more than the cyan and magentas and reds, so it separates out and you don't get a perfect focus. That prime lens you were shooting with has pretty good definition across the range, but zoom lenses tend to do this a whole lot more, particularly the very, very, the 40 to 200 and very wide zoom range lenses. So light goes through the lens, it goes through a color filter array, this little checkerboard thing, and then it hits a sensor. The interesting thing about sensors is that they only measure black and white. All they do is count photons and just say how many photons is hitting each one of these little boxes. So in order to make a black and white sensor record color, you put these little colored filters. So only the red goes through in that top left box, only green light goes through the one next to it, only blue goes through the blue one, and then you can say, okay, in this red bucket I counted this many photons, in the green or blues I counted this much, so you can understand what color light was hitting the sensor right there. The human eye does something similar. We have rods and cones in the back of our eyes. Cones detect color, rods detect black and white, and one of the interesting differences between how an eye sees and how a digital camera sees is that the rods and cones are smeared all over the back of your eye in what looks like a totally random pattern. In digital cameras, it's a very precise pattern. It's red, green, red, green, red, green, red, green, and then on the next line it's green, blue, green, blue, green, blue, green, blue. And these very predictable patterns cause problems when your subject has those same sort of problems. Some of the challenges, get into a little bit more example here. So the normal color filter array that almost all cameras have is this big one in the middle. It's called the Bayer pattern. And it's a little 2x2 grid. Fuji does some crazy stuff, and they arrange their sensors and their color filter arrays in these very different ways. But it's all pretty much the same thing. You filter out only one color of light, and then you count how many pixels, how many photons are coming through on that little photo site. And then you use that data to build back your color image out of what's basically a green image, a blue image, and a red image taken separately.
Okay.
Each one of these photo sites acts like a little bucket, and so basically it just counts photons coming in. And then the trick is with digital cameras, for one of the things that's different between film and digital, is that the sensor doesn't change when you change the ISO in the camera. Back in the film days, you bought film that was either ISO 100, ISO 800, ISO 1600, and you couldn't change the ISO between rolls, or between frames in one roll, because it was actually the chemistry of the film that was more sensitive to light. With the digital sensor, that's not the case. The sensor is always the same sensitivity. It's always just collecting the same amount of photons. As you turn up the ISO and make it more sensitive, basically you're just saying my white point is very compressed. So instead of having the full range of the bucket, at the very bottom being totally black, that means no photons are coming in. At the very top, it's totally white. You say, well, I'm going to consider white when it's half full. That's at ISO 200. Or I'm going to consider it to be pure white when my bucket is a quarter full. So the sensor is actually calculating the same thing on different, or getting the same input regardless of the ISO.
So it's really pushing the dynamic range down to...
Exactly. So if you keep your aperture and shutter speed identical, so the same amount of light is hitting the sensor, and you just crank up your ISO, pretty soon it's just going to be pure white.
Right.
And that's just because you're looking at a smaller and smaller and a smaller range. And what that means is that fewer and fewer photons are coming in, that you're still trying to get out that full either 8 or 10 or 12 bits worth of color data. And that's where noise comes from. It's you get this tiny little variation, and if I only went out to ISO 800 here, but if you were to put 6400, that's a tiny slice of the full dynamic range here that you're using to represent your full black to your full white.
That's a great explanation.
Yeah, it's easy when you get it, but yeah, and that's one of the magic about digital is that you can change ISO shot to shot just anytime you want to, and all you're really doing is saying on this one of these little steps in here, just multiply my signal by 64, just bump it up. It's basically a linear adjustment of the data that's coming through. So the human eye works similarly, but your pupil can adjust size, so it's like an aperture in your camera. So as you scan around in a very high dynamic range, as you look at the very bright areas, your pupil dilates and less light comes through. When you look in a very dark area, your pupil expands, and that's something your camera doesn't do. When you just pan around in a scene or take a picture of a landscape, you have a single aperture. The light's coming through at one aperture setting, at one shutter speed setting, and one ISO setting. And so you have to pick this sort of average exposure that you think is going to capture the whole dynamic range. Your eye doesn't have to do that. It's much smarter. It can look around, and as you look around, it can automatically and very, very quickly respond to changes in dynamic range. So what you perceive as like a full dynamic range landscape is so much broader than any digital camera can take. And what Perfectly Clear tries to do is build some tools to make up for these limitations, both in exposure, dynamic range, and then also in color gamut. So when the light was going through that little color filter array, each of those red, green, and blues had a very specific color assigned to them. And then there's a computer that says, okay, everybody's seen this little horseshoe chart over here with different, color spaces and color gamuts drawn on top, and the details aren't terribly important. But what the computer tries to do, the computer in the camera, is say, okay, the light that came through all these little funny filters, we have to map that to something that we all recognize as red or blue or green or any of the cameras, any other colors in the full gamut. And there's basically one way to do that. Back in 1931, the International Commission on Illumination, which is a term I just love, came up with a few different color models to say, how are we going to express colors in cameras? What is RGB or XYZ or all these different color spaces? And one of the big tricks is that they allow these numbers to go negative, which really does kooky stuff. You think about negative red and what that means. And that's one of the main problems about digital image processing, is that when you convert that to RGB, what most systems do is just cut that off at 0. So all of these blues and greens, you lose a lot of red detail, and that's some of what our patented technology gets around that, to make sure that the limitations in the computer model and the hardware of your camera don't come through in your final artwork.
Wow. Hey Jeff, before we move on, can we pause there for a sec?
Yeah,
there's just some good questions coming in, and I just wanted to, before we had 10,000 of them. First, there's a couple of nice comments. John Webb is saying, "I now understand ISO." Excellent, thanks, Jeff. So
good.
That's awesome. Levi, there's a kind of a question for you here. At a seminar last year, we were shown a 3D color space model of Adobe Standard, and there was a nice hole in the blue. In a previous Hangout, Levi had mentioned boosting blue saturation. Do you still do that?
I do. It's under the camera calibration tab, and it's a blue slider in there, and it's not just blue saturation in the picture. It actually affects all the colors in the image. I don't know how it works, but it just makes
well, maybe
your
we
look
can
better.
Maybe we can try that later on when Jeff's still.
Yeah, let's do another one later. Thanks, Sam.
I see another good question here from Michael. He says that if I set my camera on monochrome, he can see the image better. In the camera, you can see brightness in camera a little bit. Am I shortchanging myself when I import that image into Lightroom? If you're shooting a RAW file, no, it's completely identical. It's the same image. It's the same image data whether you shoot, set it in camera to be black and white or full color.
Except that you lose the cool black and white that the camera makes, and the camera does a pretty good job of
yeah.
black.
Yeah, so you can shoot RAW and JPEG. If you're going to do that, I would suggest going RAW plus JPEG, and then you have the JPEG that you can use either as a reference or be done with it. But yeah, that's great.
Yep.
I think that was most relevant to what you were covering there. But you can continue. Really? I don't want to totally derail your momentum there.
And while we're at it, Rob, why don't you do our station identification real quick too?
Okay, yeah. So this is our Photo Focus Lightroom Hangout for February. These are archived immediately. So as soon as we're done here, you come back to the page on Photo Focus that talks about it, or in Google Plus, or in YouTube, and it's going to be ready to go. At the end of this Hangout, Perfectly Clear is giving away one of their plugins for Lightroom Photoshop. And it's pretty awesome. You just have to be here at the end to win it, and the way you win it is by answering, or not answering, but asking a question, or again, if you can answer the question, that's fine too, or you can leave a comment in our little Q&A pod.
Just say hello.
Side and just say hello. Yeah, we got people doing that. So, and then we have Levi Sim here, myself, Rob Sylvan, and our special guest from Perfectly Clear, Jeff.
Yep.
So please continue, Jeff. Thank you.
So I was going through all the sort of details about how a camera works, how sensors work, color spaces, why color space and different color gamut matter. But at the end of the day, does any of this really matter? All of this image science, nerdy stuff, who cares? And I would say it does matter, because the first time you see an image, you see it with your eye. You don't see it with the camera. And the closer you can have the digital representation of what you saw, the more similar those are, the more impactful and more emotional that response is going to be. There's been a lot of study about this and a lot of data, and it's very important to make sure not just that the image is beautiful, but that it's accurate, that the colors look like the colors did in real life, that the dynamic range represents as closely to what the original scene looks like. And that's what Perfectly Clear is all about. It's about making these image corrections, fixing things that your camera broke or saw things differently than the human eye does, and doing it automatically and very quickly. And there are three main ways that we do that. We've got tons of different controls, and I'm not going to go into all of the different adjustments. I'm going to talk about color and exposure and vibrancy, because those are sort of the three things that have the most impact. And the first one is one of our patented corrections. It's called digital color fidelity.
I love this one. It is my favorite thing. If that was the only thing in Perfectly Clear, I would be happy to buy it twice.
It really is amazing, and it shows. This is a directly created off the fact that digital cameras just can't see purple like we do. There's an interesting thing. The digital camera stops seeing part of the color range that the human eye can see. And actually, the light is going through there, but since that red is being capped at 0, to be technical about it, in some of these purple colors, that you can't really get that same purple in a digital image that you can on film, or that your human eye sees. So Lakers jersey is a perfect example. You go out, you go to a Lakers game, you take a picture, you come back, and all their jerseys are blue. And you know that's not right. Or the FedEx box, or different flowers. It's just a very, very common problem. Digital cameras just have a hard time resolving that part of the spectrum. And so we've got some patented technology to say, turn it on, boom, okay, that's what it looks like. And so you get much more of an emotional, more accurate response when you see the Lakers jerseys, and they're actually that Laker, just a little bit of red in there. It's not just
right.
Very important, very easy. And then the other one is perfect exposure. So obviously, we talked about some of those dynamic range problems and how the human eye sees light differently. And so basically, in a digital image, you set the shutter speed once, you set the aperture once, and ISO once, and you take a picture. But the human eye looks around, and you're constantly changing and varying that. And so what we do is we've got, again, some patented technology that emulates having a separate aperture, separate amount of light hitting the sensor at each one of those little photo sites. So it does a very, very good job of giving you natural dynamic range boost without color casts and without saturation boosts. If you go into Lightroom or Photoshop or your editor tool and you take exposure and you move it all the way up, one thing that almost always happens is that the colors get more saturated.
Right.
Color shift when you're doing an exposure change. Well, that's not natural. That's not right. So what we tried to do is invent technology where you can do color change totally separate from the exposure, and the dynamic range changes totally separate from the color. And so that's for perfect exposure. It's one click. It's automatic. I'll show you some examples here in a minute. And then this sort of all comes together with our vibrancy. So in the old way, you see a scene like this one on the left, and it's kind of washed out. Digital cameras are notorious for this. Film did a lot better job of having that sort of presence or depth when you go out and just take a shot. There's nothing the photographer did wrong on this frame in the left. It's just not that interesting. It's not that engaging. You get this haze, so sort of this atmospheric haze. And there are lots of different ways that software tries to correct this. And this little path up here on the top is the most common one. So a lot of like one-click correction tools will go through this sort of process. First, they boost the luminance. So they say, okay, it's too dark, it's too dim, let's make everything brighter. But then that just makes the image brighter. That doesn't, it expands the dynamic range, but it doesn't look any better. So then they boost saturation. Say, okay, let's get it a lot richer. But that oversaturates everything. And then they try to do this hue shift, and that doesn't work either. And I can walk you through an example in Photoshop, and it's just a mess. So again, we've got some patented technology. It goes in, it looks at the dynamic range, it looks at the color range, and with one click, it gives you a very, very natural, real-looking scene without altering the things that make that image, look real to you. It doesn't go over the top. It's just a very natural correction. So that's cool. That's my presentation. I can go back through any details. I can go into some examples. I'm not sure if there's some questions that we need to touch on.
I think we've got some questions and comments we can go through. Dana says she won Perfectly Clear a few months and she loves it. That's awesome. Glad you're back, even though you already won.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Jack is saying sometimes Perfectly Clear renders over the top, at other times it's fine. Do you know what causes the over the top?
I would have to look at some of those example images. One of the things we added into our plugins is the ability to fade or control the opacity.
Yeah.
So that can be really handy. Just roll that back to about 80 or 70, wherever you feel is nice and good for your images. And then you can save that as a preset, so it's very easy to apply quickly repetitively across your whole shoot.
Yeah, your topmost slider in the whole thing is an opacity slider that
exactly.
You can reduce that with, Jack. So give that a shot. There's some other good questions related to this portion. Somebody was asking about the Fuji sensors, and is that why they do really well with green but not so good with blue, or at least the older
ones? Fuji has gone out of their way to experiment. Almost all digital cameras use this Bayer pattern, and Fuji almost always doesn't.
Right.
And I used to run a company that made raw conversion software, and so what we would do is actually look at these raw bits and then make our own demosaic algorithms. And the Fuji sensors always gave us headaches because we can't just process them like any other image, any other raw file. What they're trying to do is just lay out these color filters in a more random or less repetitive way. And so, yeah, they can become, they can do a better job of capturing dynamic range. They get this big white cell down. This is the I'm not sure what camera this is in, actually. These are all from Wikipedia. But yeah, the original Fujis back in the early 2000s had this hexagonal pattern, and they actually put little photo sensors in these gaps, so these little black cells between the filters. So they added some extra pixels in there, extra photo sites.
Interesting.
Yeah, but what you'll notice in all of these is there's a lot more green than anything else. Like in the Bayer pattern, you've got in any 2x2 grid,
it's almost 2/3,
one blue, one red, and two greens.
Yeah.
Well, and the reason for that is that the color spectrum is centered around green.
Interesting.
The eye is more sensitive to green. So most of the light that comes through, if you look at this little horseshoe over here, most of the light that comes through our atmosphere ends up being mostly green. So by doing this, you get twice as many measurements of that green, and then it's only counted half as much. And you can get better luminance data, better brightness, and so that's why even in these other more exotic sensor arrays that Fuji does, you still see a much bigger green than you do of red or blue. It's kind of interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's cool. And we didn't even talk about Foveon sensors where they stack them up.
Oh.
A complete sheet.
The Foveon was it's sort of a great theory. So they didn't have a color filter array, or what they did more precisely is that under each section they recorded both red, green, and blue in one in each cell, in each pixel. So the dirty little secret of digital cameras is that if you were to count these little photo sites down here on a 10 megapixel camera, you'd have 10 million of those photo sites. But you're really only measuring green 5 million times.
Right.
And red 2.5 million times, and blue 2.5 million times, and then you're adding this all up and saying, okay, well at this cell, I know I was only counting green, but there's some red and blue nearby, so I'm going to create an RGB value at that pixel based on my neighbors, the values of the reds and the greens of the neighbors, and that's what Foveon was trying to undo, to say, no, every single photo center site, we're going to measure all three. So they were very low res cameras. They would be like a 3 megapixel camera, but would have the sharpness and the detail of something like a 9 or 10 megapixel Bayer pattern sensor.
So that's for our show for Lies Engineers Tell.
That's right.
Exactly.
Lies marketing departments tell.
Yeah.
Because the engineers are actually going back there. Well, actually, we shouldn't call it a 10 megapixel.
Yeah.
A couple more questions. Is there a place that people can go for tutorials for getting started with Perfectly Clear?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got webinars and tutorials online if you go to athentech.com. And then there are videos. There's a link to the videos down at the bottom, or you can go to our support page, and there are FAQs and videos there. We've got some great tutorial videos that explain how to get started with it, how to work it into your workflow, both in Photoshop and Lightroom. And then these webinars. We've got a bunch of webinars that are focused just on Perfectly Clear. Those are all recorded and up on our website as well. And so there are lots of different ways to get started with it.
Perfect.
Excellent.
And do you know how many computers people can install their Perfectly Clear
two
software on?
at any one time, so you can use two simultaneously. And then if you need a third, you can just deactivate one and then reactivate on the other one. So you can travel around and have it installed on multiple machines, as many as you want, with only two active at one time.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much. Emmett is asking, I've noticed that Perfectly Clear version 2, V2, tends to add noise when used in Photoshop and Lightroom. I see the effect more pronounced in Photoshop. Do I have to process twice?
Really?
Once to enhance and a second time to reduce noise?
I haven't. I'm not familiar with that. I'd love to see some sample images. If you're boosting the dynamic range a whole lot, then that can make the existing noise more apparent. But just click on our noise control. So I'm just
it's been my experience that the opposite happens. Even if I crank up the exposure and change things around quite a lot, it reduces. I've never had it create noise, and it usually reduces existing noise for me. So I'm really surprised to hear that.
Yeah.
Jeff, is there a way people can send you a sample, or is that too much, or?
Yeah, I'd love to see them. I'm not sure the best way to do that. If we can post something, a folder that folks can upload to on Google or shared drive or something, some way to get images or connect afterwards.
How about if it maybe send it to Levi or I, either at levi@photofocus.com or rob@photofocus.com, and we can get those to Jeff.
We can forward those on to him.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So sometimes when I hear those things, I don't know in Emma's case, but sometimes I wonder if maybe there's some other workflow issue where the Lightroom or photo or Camera Raw edits are not being applied before it goes to the plugin. I don't know.
There could be a million different things going on. Either, just a lot of noise in the original image, or a color space conversion, or I'm not sure.
Do some troubleshooting there.
Yeah.
I'm just scanning through of other questions related to what you've shown. Does Perfectly Clear improve sharpness as well as color balance?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Let me just open up Perfectly Clear here. So we'll go through a couple of examples. Yeah, I just hit on sort of our three big primary corrections: exposure, color, and vibrance. But we've got all sorts of tools: sharpness, clarity, noise reduction, these portrait corrections, skin smoothing, teeth whitening, eye enhancement, dark circle removal. Obviously, I'm just showing a landscape here, so those aren't going to have a lot of effects. But the interesting thing about all of our technology is that it's designed to be automatic. So we came into this photo here, and that was straight out of the camera, and that's Perfectly Clear. So it automatically applies these default settings, and you can see that it's just richer. There's more color. There's more depth. It's a more natural-looking photo automatically. No correction at all. You can come back and do opacity and start to fade that out, as the one question earlier came through. So if that looks good but a little over the top, you can just dial it back a little bit. Or you can experiment with some of the other presets, like Vivid or Details or Landscape preset is very intense in these colors and vibrancy. And you can kind of scale that back as well. So it's very easy to use, one-touch tools. You can create your own presets and very quickly see straight out of the camera, Perfectly Clear.
Nice. Mike Dixon is asking if Perfectly Clear also deals with color casts.
Yeah,
like white balance adjustment, I guess? We've
got this tint correction. I don't think any of my examples here have a color cast. I can pull one of those up, but yeah, we do. Tint correction and color cast is one of the hardest things to correct. It's one of the hardest things to detect. What was the actual illuminant? What did this actually look like in real life? and try to determine what correct looks like. So that's one of those things that we're always researching and trying to improve. Let me see if I can find a quick example of that.
And while you're looking for that, let me just read off. There's a couple of questions that are on this same theme.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Which is, do you recommend that people process first in Lightroom and then send the copy with Lightroom adjustments to Perfectly Clear, or do you send kind of as close to the raw, untouched original to Perfectly Clear first, and then finish off in Lightroom?
A great question. What I do is take straight out of the camera, I take them into Lightroom, I zero out all the corrections, and I run that through Perfectly Clear, just using the default. So I just do a batch. I'll take my whole shoot, 2,000, 3,000 photos, batch convert them in one run through Lightroom, just as JPEGs. So I have my original RAW files and my Perfectly Clear JPEGs. Go through those very quickly and see if any of them need some tweaking, and then either reprocess those in Perfectly Clear, maybe with a different preset, or apply some, local adjustments in Lightroom, or sort of the finishing touches on the corrected version. If I know I'm going to be doing lots of retouching and lots of manipulation after the fact, then I'll do that in TIFFs instead of JPEGs. But for 90% of what I'm doing, it's raw through Perfectly Clear into JPEGs, maybe a little bit of touch-up after that, and then off to the presses.
Wow, that's awesome. I've worked with so many different people, helping them with Lightroom over the years. I've seen so many different ways that people approach this. I've kind of come to the conclusion that there's no one right way.
Yeah.
But as long as the way you're using makes sense to you and gives you the results you're happy with, and that's your right way.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And so I think part of what that turns out for people who are getting started is they see lots of conflicting advice on what's the right way. So just my opinion is that there's no one right way, except if the way you're doing it really makes you happy, it looks good to you, what you deliver to people, that makes them happy, then that's your right way. So, but that's awesome here. So, because I know that some people use a combination of plugins too. So it's not even just one. They might start with Lightroom, do something Perfectly Clear, then go to Photoshop, and then they finish it in Topaz, and so
exactly.
There's
what
lots of different.
What Perfectly Clear tries to do is give you the most natural, realistic starting point. What we don't try to do is the creative stuff. We're not a filter, right? We're not doing vignettes and all the artistic things that separate you from every other photographer out there. We give you that most natural starting point. You can do some creative stuff in it, but that's not what it's focused at. What it's focused is to give you the most natural, real-looking image with the least amount of effort. So you can spend your time, doing the creative stuff, adding effects, using other filters or built-in tools. So here's a tint example. We've got our skier on blue snow, and I'm just going to hit my fixed tint preset.
Bingo, love it.
Yeah, and obviously this is an example that it works perfectly on. I'll admit that there are images that trick it. So what you can do is come on Adjust, and then you have this little tint correction slider, so you can say, well, maybe that's too much, or you want to retain a little bit of that blue, kind of that cool winter feel. But that's how it works. That's how you just see a problem. If you have a tint problem, hit Fix Tint. If you have a noise problem, hit Fix Noise. Flip over to Adjust, and you get all the details of those individual controls.
That's awesome.
Cool. Here's a somewhat seemingly related question that was asked a while ago. Is there an easy explanation how Perfectly Clear knows that the blue should be purple and not blue? I guess that was referring to your Lakers jersey example.
Yeah, there are. It's basically science and a lot of empirical data based on how specific camera sensors see the image and see light. We have a way, so the trick, let me go back to my little slideshow here. The trick is you have to preserve these purples that the camera sees and the blues and not add red there, but add in red to the very, very end of the spectrum to map those purples that were out of gamut back into the scene. So it's some combination of some clever math and a lot of empirical data and a couple of patents.
Cool. Yeah, math always comes up when you don't expect it.
That's right. Somebody just asked also, I think it was Robert Green asked, can Perfectly Clear be used as a smart filter in Photoshop? And yes, it can. And so the great thing about using it on a smart object in Photoshop is that when we reopen, you can reopen a photograph and continue working on it with the sliders in the same position that they were, whereas any other time when we save it from a plugin like Perfectly Clear, it cooks it and you either have to start over again, which is not a big deal in this case, or work on that new photo from the beginning. Whereas with a smart filter, we can go back and all the settings are in the same place. You've just got to try it.
We've got a tutorial on our website exactly on that, how to do the smart filter workflow in Photoshop, and it's quick and easy. We're not any different from any other plugin in that regard, but it's a handy tip if you want to go back and adjust quite a bit.
And this fits with Marcy's question. Is it perfect? Sorry, Rob.
You're right. You're right with me. Go ahead.
Okay, cool.
I was just going to say.
Marcy asked, is Perfectly Clear non-destructive like Lightroom? No, unless you use it as a smart filter.
Correct.
So we're kind of at the top of our hour. Jeff, do you have a few more minutes to run through some more questions?
Sure, you bet. I see one from Raul saying that Perfectly Clear runs very slow on the last version, Windows 10. We did an update just a few weeks ago. Raul, if you're on a Windows machine, then we have a fix for you. Go to Perfectly Clear or Athentech.com/downloads/plugins, or just hit the check for updates inside the plugin, and that should cure that for you.
And if I can just brag on Perfectly Clear a little bit, they are really responsive. Jeff is actively making fixes for problems. I sent him an email the other day about a problem I noticed, and he's fixing it this week. And I mean, they're just right on top of it as far as keeping things up to date and solving problems. I really love what you guys do for us.
Yeah, and on that, we love to hear from you. You can connect to us on Facebook or Twitter or Google Plus, and let us know if you have problems. Let us know if you see issues. If you have these questions, we're here to help. You can email us at help@athentech.com. I love hearing feedback about people that are actually using it, what they're using it for, how we can help make that better. We're here to help.
Is that a good place people could send you sample images, Jeff?
Yeah, that'll work. That'll go through our support staff first, which is mostly, if something's broken, you lose your license code, or
right.
bug, so that'll eventually get to us. But sure, that's a good way to do it.
Okay. And Richard Lerner was asking again. Yeah, Richard, you can send Rob or I an email, and we'll forward you on to Jeff as well. So that's Rob@PhotoFocus or Levi@PhotoFocus.com.
What was I going to see? It just keeps jumping on.
They keep moving around, yeah.
Yeah. We're trying to go through. Danny is asking about us discussing making your own camera profiles. That's a good topic. Unfortunately, a little bit bigger than what we have time for now.
Right.
So Levi and I are going to file that one away, and that's something that we can definitely cover in the future.
I do it all the time, yeah.
But no, it was a good question. Certainly a relevant one, too.
Lots of thank yous.
Lots of thank yous. Excellent. Lots of people liking the show. I need to update Perfectly Clear, but that dialogue no longer appears. So how do I update it?
Athentech.com/downloads/plugins. So I don't know why that dialogue wouldn't pop back up. Or if you just go to our website and go to our plugins page and hit try, our trials and the full versions are identical. So just go through the trial, download the latest version, and install it right over the one you already have, and that'll be the latest.
Yeah, I can tell you, Jeff, on my Mac, the Perfectly Clear menu doesn't have anything in it.
Okay, we'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
All right.
So thanks.
Another one just jumped on me. It was a good question too. Can Perfectly Clear be used as a Lightroom replacement? Is there a library or catalog feature?
No, not right now. We're working on some standalone tools. We have a standalone tool called Lucid, standalone application. It's all the same technology as Perfectly Clear, but it's sort of a simpler interface. It's designed to be used, very quick. So it doesn't have a database, but you can just drag in, a folder of 100 images and click through them and process them. We're looking at things, and we're talking about the idea of building sort of a full application. But Lightroom does so many things that are useful, just the cataloging, the exporting, the printing, and it's such a handy tool to have that it's a great pair for us right now.
Excellent. Peter's got a good question. He says, can you explain the audio exposure feature more clearly, and does this feature work individually on each photo when batch processing through Perfectly Clear in Lightroom? Yes, to the second part. It does. It's incredible. When I can take 500 pictures from a wedding or from a family reunion or something, and I just open them all, or I just select them all in Lightroom, and using the export dialog, I can push each of those pictures through Perfectly Clear in a batch, and Perfectly Clear analyzes each one individually and makes the right amount of adjustments on each picture, including the face, and it does the skin retouching, and it does the color adjustments and the tint correction if needed on each picture. It's really incredible.
Yeah, so exactly what Levi's saying is exactly right. Every image is analyzed individually. So basically, what we do is when you send the image to Perfectly Clear, the technology goes in and looks at a bunch of different statistics about the image: dynamic range across different colors, noise in different areas, and the shadows and the highlights. Whether they're faces, if the faces are smiling, or if they have the eyes open, multiple people. If there's a tint adjustment, if it detects an illuminant other than the sun, or abnormal color cast, and then it uses our technology to say, okay, here's what the image has, and then try to correct that based on the settings. So if you do just a little bit of exposure, it's not going to boost it quite as much. You can either go low, medium, or high. These can all be parts of your presets. You can turn the depth correction on and off, so it's not doing that dynamic range boost. But every image is individually analyzed. Every image is processed separately to make sure each one looks as good as possible.
Excellent. Hey, Rob, why don't we draw our winner and then keep answering questions so we can let folks go who need to go.
Yeah, how about you work on the names, and I should follow up and show people how to do to configure your default camera raw preferences so that you can add those camera profile adjustment or the lens adjustment.
Oh, excellent.
As I mentioned earlier, would that be
Great.
Cool?
Yes, I'm ready to announce then.
You ready to announce? You already got it, huh?
I've got it. So if you want to get that ready, I'll take care of this part.
Yeah, how about I don't know, Jeff, if you need to go, I don't want to make you hang out for that piece.
Sounds good.
So thank you very much for spending this hour with us, and your information was fantastic. People really appreciated it, and hopefully maybe we can have you come back again, because there's more that we can cover.
Thanks for having me, guys. I sure do appreciate it.
All right,
thanks so much, Jeff. Care. We'll let you go, and we'll keep answering questions to our ability while you're away.
To our ability, yeah. All right, so why don't you go ahead and announce the names and how that part works while I switch over, okay?
I sure will. And if you'd like to catch up with Jeff, I know he's going to be at WPPI the first of next month, on starting on the 6th of March, and I'll be there as well, and we can catch up with him there if you'd like to meet Jeff in person. So
sounds good. Stop on by.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
All right, take care, Jeff.
And our winner from Denmark is Lars Brunke, I hope. Lars, if you're still here, please leave us a comment again in the Q&A section and let me know that you're still in, and I'll send you a license for Perfectly Clear for Lightroom and Photoshop. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to keep answering questions.
All right, so I'm going to go through and show how you can add some of these things to your defaults, so that when you first import a photo into Lightroom, what Lightroom does is it applies its default settings for that particular camera for that RAW format. All right, you can apply an import preset. I'm not talking about that. That's totally separate. All right, that's fine if you want to do that, but you don't have to do that to do what I'll show you. So so here's how a photo just came in to Lightroom. This is not particularly pretty. Let me bring it all the way, make sure all the way back to import. So it looked like this, okay? And I had a few things applied in my default, so I'm going to make sure those things are all back to the Adobe defaults, all right? So what you want to do to configure your own default settings is to start with a photo that has not been processed at all, okay? You don't want to include any settings that will then be applied to every other photo after that. So this is a photo. I've already hit reset. There's nothing else being applied. As shot, white balance, and camera calibrations on Adobe Standard, and lens correction. These are unchecked. So this is a photo that has nothing has been done, all right? And just to make sure, I'm going to come to develop on this photo because I've already set my defaults. And this is for a Nikon D5300. And I'm just going to click on Restore Adobe Default Settings. So this is as back to the default factory Lightroom setting as it could be, all right? So now what I need to do is decide what settings do I want to include in my custom default so that when a photo comes in from this Nikon D5300 camera, those photos will have these settings applied automatically without me pressing a button or doing anything else, all right? And so the first thing I might choose is my camera profile. Maybe I prefer camera standard, say. I mean, this is a personal preference. You got to choose what works for you. And then maybe I want to include this remove chromatic aberration automatically one-click check, right? And maybe I might want to include my profile corrections. I'm going to pause only because this is something you should think about, because Lightroom has to do a bit more work when it's applying these profile corrections than when not. All right, and this can maybe impact your workflow later on if you're doing maybe a local adjustment and you're finding Lightroom is moving really slow. If you have enabled profile corrections checked, you're asking Lightroom to do a little bit more, and as a result, sometimes it can slow things down. So if you do want to include your camera profile correction in your defaults, what I also do is I have a preset that now allows me to disable that profile correction with one click.
Oh, cool.
And then re-enable it with one click. So that way, if I find that Lightroom is slowing down, maybe if I'm doing a spot removal, that's the combination that probably slows it down the most.
It is. It's killer.
This box checked and doing a spot removal. I'll just disable that for the time I'm using the spot removal. Then when I'm done, I'll come back in here and enable it again. So if you want to include in your default, just keep that in mind. Lightroom may be working harder when it's rendering out all those previews and doing all that other stuff, okay? So that's my little caveat there on that. And then you can go on and include anything else. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll customize my capture sharpening settings. I find that under the Lightroom general presets, there's one for faces and one for scenic that I tend to find for my personal photography I like as a better starting point, because all this does is give you a different starting point. And I think I use scenic is more appropriate to the photos that I shoot. And I usually just add a little bit of masking, right? And I think we did a whole nother hangout on sharpening and stuff.
We did,
so if
yeah.
you go to Photo Focus, yeah, someone asked for Lightroom, getting started with Lightroom. If you go to photofocus.com, we have a Lightroom Learning Center that's just full of all of our past hangouts and all of the tutorials, hundreds that we've written on Lightroom. So I would
Not to mention 2 books we've written that are.
And
I think the sale just ended yesterday. Actually, I was going to say they're on sale,
right.
but I think the sale
Well,
ended yesterday. They're still, yeah, they're like $3.
So let's say I put it at 50. Okay, so now I've dialed in some settings. All right, I want these settings to be applied to every raw photo from this particular camera. So now I'm going to go back to Develop, Set Default Settings, and I'm going to choose Update to Current Settings. All right, and this sounds a little scary. Please note these changes are not undoable. That means that after I apply this, the edit undo function is not going to undo this, okay? And I'm also, by doing this, I won't be able to edit undo some other things. I can always go back and rechange these.
They're
just
changeable,
like you saw me do
they're
before.
just not undoable, yeah.
Right, I can always restore to Adobe defaults if I realize I did something wrong, all right? You can always add something else if you decide later, okay? So you can always change it, all right? So I'm gonna choose Update to Current Settings, and now when I click Reset, nothing changes. This is now my default. So when I click Reset, that's also my default. So every photo from this camera, every raw photo, I should say, will have these settings applied once they on import. After they've already been imported, like I've already got thousands of photos from this camera, those are not being changed. This is only going to affect either when I click the reset button or future imports from this camera. And if you shoot with multiple camera bodies, You have to do this process with a raw photo from each camera. All right.
Yeah, that's neat. Now, what if you double click on sharpening right now, like on the word? Does it zero out, or does it? No, because that's the setting that it considers zero.
That's my default. Yeah.
Cool.
That's
okay.
Setting it back to the default. Yep. So
Excellent.
Make sure you only have in there what you want and nothing else, and then you're good to go. All right.
Excellent.
So did our winners show up?
I didn't see another comment from Lars. Lars, are you in there? Give us another comment. If you're not here, we're going to draw another winner. So please leave another question in the Q&A section to let us know that you are still here. Otherwise, I'm going to draw somebody else.
Yeah, while you get that name ready, Tom is asking, what's the major difference between TIFF and JPEG? The major difference is JPEG uses a lossy compression formula, or algorithm, more math. And by that means it throws out some information. It tries to really pick information that human eye doesn't see very well, so it does a good job of it if you don't apply too much JPEG compression. But TIFF, there is a compressed TIFF format, but it's not lossy. It's lossless. So TIFF file sizes tend to be larger. JPEGs are smaller. And TIFF also supports layers and 16-bit and a lot more. So TIFF is a great format for when you're in your editing workflow. JPEG is a great file format for when you're sending out to deliver to someplace else.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that, Levi? Is that
nope.
kind of the basics there?
It's a big file comparatively.
So did we hear from all our winners?
We haven't heard back from Lars yet. I'm going to draw somebody else, Lars. We'll answer one more question, then I'm drawing somebody else. Let's see. So Von Bender asks, is there, in Perfectly Clear, are there different levels of control? You're not familiar with Perfectly Clear. Yes, there are different levels of control. And the best thing any of you guys can do is just go download the free trial and dive in and give it a shot. And there are all the tutorials on athentech.com, ATHENTEC.com, or TECH.com. And then we've also got a bunch of webinars and tutorials on photo focus about this as well. And I use Perfectly Clear every single day in my work. And Scott is also asking, do we zero out all the sliders or do we do some settings first? You can do it either way, like we mentioned before. Sometimes it's the very first thing I do. Sometimes I do my white balance first. Sometimes I lift the shadows a little bit. The more I use it, the more I use Perfectly Clear, the more I see which things I want to adjust before I go into Perfectly Clear. And it's different whether I'm doing a landscape or a portrait or a cityscape kind of thing. So, like we said, there's really no rule about
what Jeff said. I like what Jeff said because I think it's that phrase about eating your own dog food. You know, he's the engineer behind it. So yeah, he's just going to use Lightroom as the front end to Perfectly Clear, you know, and try to do as little as possible to get the most Perfectly Clear result. That makes total sense. An Adobe engineer would probably give you the opposite answer, right? They would do as much as they could in Lightroom, and then if they had to, you know, if there was like a gun to their head and their arm was tied behind their back, then they would go to some other plugin, right? But for the rest of us, you're gonna fall somewhere in between, and it may change. So, no wrong answer there. I have to say there's a comment from Robert Green. Interesting webinar, far more spontaneous, unplanned webinar as a comparison to Creative Live and Toba. Yes, it is.
Yes. Thanks for joining us, Robert. We saw lots of comments and questions from you, and we appreciate your input. Yeah. We may not address everything every time, but we sure appreciate you being here.
That's why we call it a hangout, because it's very
That's
casual.
right. Yeah, we're hanging out. Yeah. It's kind of
we never know what questions will be asked or who will have the technical issue of the month or anything like that. So
that's right.
Are we still waiting for a winner?
We didn't hear from him, so we're moving on. And so I'm going to Beck Viper. Beck, are you still here? If she's still here, or he, please.
BEQ?
BYPER.
BYPER.
Beck Viper, or
Beck Viper. That sounds like
Bella Wren.
A villain. Superhero. Superhero
villain name.
Beck Viper. Yeah.
I'm the Viper. Yes.
Who's into flower photography, which, you know, it could be true. You know, if you think about, Hunger Games, that guy was into white roses. So,
Well, Beck, if you're still here, please leave us another comment, and we will get you a license for Perfectly Clear for Lightroom and Photoshop.
For anyone still there, there was a question I saw about DNG, which always gets asked.
Yes.
I'm in the camp that doesn't convert on import, but I do eventually. And the reason I do eventually is because of the file savings, because DNG uses a compression format that is lossless. That tends to be much smaller than my original raw files. And the reason I don't on import is because I'm impatient and I don't like to wait. But otherwise, you don't have to. It's fine if you don't.
So I'm the guy who does convert at import, and because of the file savings, and I do it at import because I know I'm not going to get to it later, because my system is not that well refined where I'm going to get to it. So I go ahead and do it at import. But with Lightroom 6, now I can now it does the convert to import after, or convert to DNG after it imports. So I feel like I'm not losing time savings. It does eat up some processor power while it's doing that. So, but there's also the little X. So now it's a slider. It's a progress slider, and I can click on that at any time and cancel it if I need my computer's brain power back.
Yeah, and so for anyone maybe joined in late, this is archived. You'll be able to watch it wherever you're watching it from now. That's where you should be able to watch it again, either from the Google Plus page, on the Photo Focus page, YouTube.
Yeah. And by the way, we did start right on the hour this time. We have been known to be a couple minutes late, but this time we were right on the hour. So I don't know why it didn't show up.
Our guest had some issues, but we were Levi and I were there. Yeah, so just look for it. You can watch it over and over and over and over again, along with all of our past Hangouts are all still up there for viewing.
That's right. Did we hear from Beck? Nothing from Beck. All right, I'm going to grab another one because we're losing people, is what I suspect.
Yeah.
Oh,
if you're still here, leave a comment so we know you're still here.
That's right. Beck, last chance.
Denny Weinman says, "I'm here. I call dibs."
Well, thanks, Danny Weinman. Actually, it's going to Danny Pelletier, who's our next winner here from Maynard, Massachusetts. So, Danny, if you're here, please leave us a question again saying, "Hello, I'm here." And I don't think we answered Danny's question yet either about presets being cumulative. In other words, if I can do a tint and then noise and the tint remains applied. Yes. So you can stack up a bunch of adjustments and they remain applied.
Yeah, just remember that in Lightroom, a preset is just some text. It's a text file that says exposure +1 or vibrance -10 or whatever the setting is. So if you have one preset that says exposure +1 and another preset that says vibrance -10, you can click on those all day long and they never affect each other, right? And you can add a bunch of other presets that have different settings and it won't change anything. But if you have one preset that is exposure +1 and another preset that is exposure +2, when you click the exposure +1 preset, it's the exposure slider gets set to +1. If you click the +2 preset, it doesn't add 2 more, it goes to +2. And so you would just be going back and forth between a +1 and a +2 setting, not cumulatively adding them up to +3. All right. So in the develop module, the presets are not cumulative in that way.
Thanks, Rob. Jack Larson says, "What is the latest version of Perfectly Clear?" And it's version 2, and then some updates. So it's like version 2.1 or 2.102 or something right now. So if you've got version 1 of Perfectly Clear, there is a significant change with version 2.
Nice. We got a nice comment from Dick McFarland in Scotland saying, "We're great tips, great chat." He's going to spread the word to his mates in Glasgow, Scotland. That's awesome. I've just been getting into drinking scotch too, Dick. So if you have any connections you want to send my way, appreciate that. I've been sampling. I've been trying to expand the palette there. So.
Well, and try out our Facebook or our Facebook group for Photo Focus, and also our Google Plus and 500px. Those are great places to connect with people.
We're all around there too.
Okay, wait, is this Danny? Oh, well, thanks, Danny's already
Danny,
got
he already has it.
All right.
Hey, but thanks for hanging in there with us.
Time's the charm.
Dan.
Yeah. Here we go. Let's draw one more person here. Come on, Levi, get the right person. How about Monica Brezel? Monica, are you in? I hope so, because she asked,
so
"Is there a demo of the software?" Yes, there's a 30 or is it 30 days or is it 2 weeks? I think it's a 30-day trial.
I thought it was 30 days, but
Yeah.
I'm not really sure.
But Monica doesn't have to deal with that, because if she just leaves us a comment.
Mispronounced your name. Wyman. Sorry.
Yeah, Danny Wyman.
I'm really bad at pronouncing names. I apologize to anyone who's butchered over all this time. I absolutely apologize. There was another question that jumped around here.
Monica, leave us another note that says you're here, or else we're picking somebody else. And what other question do we have there?
Here's a
profiles recognize teleconverters. Yes.
Nice. Like the easy questions.
Yeah.
Levi, do you know if someone has a perfectly clear license for version 1, do they get a free upgrade to version 2, or is it a separate purchase?
It's a separate purchase, but it is a discount.
Discount. Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
You might have to ask the help section on that. I'm not sure if it's apparent when you go to purchase online.
We see a lot of people like the alt option tip. Good. Glad that was helpful.
Shane Morrissey asks if Perfectly Clear can correct a color cast on part of an image, not by itself, but if you use it as a layer in Photoshop, then you can blend through and paint back in the corrected portion. And that kind of thing is why I have it for Photoshop too. Yeah.
Do you know the difference between Topaz and Perfectly Clear? Like someone was asking that, but I don't use Topaz to really.
I do. So Topaz has a lot of tools in it. There's a ton of tools in Topaz. There's some for noise and there's some for turning a picture into a painting and things. I don't know about Topaz Clear in particularly, but Perfectly Clear is my starting place for most pictures. So I go there first for portraits, and I go there first for landscapes. And then after I've done my Perfectly Clear stuff to get the color looking great and get the skin smoothed out, then I go to something like Topaz to do some effects. Perfectly Clear is not my finishing tool. It's my before finish tool. It's not a creative tool like Jeff was saying. It's a get it fixed and ready for creativity tool. And it does it so quickly that, I mean, most of the things in there we could do in Photoshop or in Lightroom, but it just does them so much faster and simpler in Perfectly Clear, and it lets me be creative. I've got a certain amount of time that I can spend on the computer working on photographs, and the less time I have to spend fixing them, the more time I can spend being creative, and that feeds my creativity.
Nice. All right, I am not seeing our winner. I keep scrolling back and forth here.
Yeah, no, Monica. Okay, here we go. We're going to get down to it where the only person left with us is the one who's going to win.
So how many did you have to give away? 2?
I've
have one.
I've just got the one, I think.
Oh, just the one. And we haven't been able to come up with one.
We still can't give away one, so I don't know what. How about Elena Rodriguez? Are you still here, Elena? If you're still with us, please weigh in with one more comment and say you are here. Elena Rodriguez. We'd love to give this to you. I'd love to give it to anybody at this point. Danny Wyman, you may just get your chance before long.
Levi, I just sent you a secret chat message. What do you think of this idea?
Okay, let me find the secret chat.
Look in the text chat.
I don't love that idea. Rob said, how about the first person to email me? No, don't email me. Don't email me. First person to email Rob.
Elena is here.
Elena's here.
Elena is here. Thank you, Elena.
Thanks, Elena.
So
Elena, just send me an email.
And a kiss, too. Thank you. Elena, send Levi an email. Levi@photofocus.com.
That's right. And I'll send you a license code, a license key for Perfectly Clear. Thanks for being here, Richard, and Vaughn, and Michael.
And everyone else that's still here. And we'll be back in March.
We'll be back
in March.
Yeah. Do we have any other significant questions that we can
help with?
I don't know. I'm afraid I don't know about details. I've noticed. Oh, we already talked about that one. Adding noise. And again, if you have some pictures you want to share with Jeff, you can send them to Rob or I, and we will forward them to Jeff so that he can communicate with you. And that's what I've done. I've been really impressed when I send him a picture with a problem.
Yeah. There were some questions about 5K, 4K monitors. I don't know answers to that.
Oh, I've got an answer for that, actually.
Okay, do you go?
I'm looking at my picture on a 4K monitor right now, and I don't know why this is. I meant to ask Jeff when he was in, and I'll ask him again. The key is you need to just zoom in to a certain point. So use the control plus or minus, or there's a zoom slider. Oh, let me share my screen. I'm going to share my screen the whole time here. Let's switch to me and share screen 2 and hit share. Do you see my screen, Rob?
I see it now, yes.
Okay, great. So here in Perfectly Clear, if I hit Control or Command 0, it zooms my picture out to view the entire thing. And then I can either use this slider at the bottom, or I can do Command plus to zoom in more. And you'll see that, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but on my screen, it's not clear. And I suspect this is what he's talking about. And here it's not clear. And here it's not super sharp, like it looks like it needs to render. But if I zoom in, typically past 50% on my 4K screen, then it clears right up and it looks perfect again. And the same thing happens on my Retina screen. If there's certain zoom positions where it just doesn't render. I don't know what the deal is. But if I zoom in a little bit more, then it goes sharp again for me. So try zooming in on your 4K screen, and I think it'll look better. Any other good questions in there? Hello, Robin Owen. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. Oh, no, Elena's going to have a panic attack. Oh, wait, no, Elena. Oh, yeah, Elena weighed in. She's the one who's here. Good.
Yeah, she's
why aren't you reading my comments? She's going to have a panic attack.
I think that was from before.
Yes.
There's so many. I mean, there were hundreds of comments here.
Yeah, we're glad you guys are here.
It was great. It was really excellent. Excellent questions this time. So I think we should probably wrap it up. So we have stuff to talk about next month, huh?
Yes, that's right. In fact, next month, we've got a terrific guest. We're confirming with him, so we're not going to tell you who he is, but you're going to be excited to see him. He's a wonderful fellow to have. And Rob, where can we find you in the meantime?
Well, photofocus.com. There's some stuff on there. Finally got something new up there recently.
Yes,
nice.
Excellent.
Or lightroomers.com. This is another neglected blog I have. That's there. You know, busy. It's all good. How about you, Levi? Where can we find you?
I am. I'm also on photofocus.com, or you can catch me on Instagram at PhotoLevi. And we're sure glad you joined us. Thanks everybody for being here.
All right. Take care, everyone. Hopefully see you next month.